I have determined that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
Well, this is a day that many of us have been waiting for, praying for, hoping for. And today, the President of the United States, in a very historic moment, has decided that he would exercise an option that has been on the table for over 22 years and declare that Israel is, in fact, a nation whose capital is Jerusalem, the undivided city of Jerusalem as its historic and indigenous capital. Now, why is this so important? What difference does it make to you if you're living somewhere like Waxahachie, Texas? What does it matter that the U.S. Embassy will eventually be moved to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv, and that we have now recognized Jerusalem, or we could say it as the Jewish people do, Yerushalayim, as the historic home? Well, over the next half hour, we're going to be helping you to understand not only why this day is so historic, why this decision and the signature of the president that you see taking place there on your screen, why this marks a dramatic change in American diplomacy and American policy. But more importantly, why is this important? Is it important to us as a nation politically and diplomatically? But I think my guest tonight would also say it's important to us spiritually and biblically. Joining me, Pastor John Hagee from San Antonio, Texas, the pastor of Cornerstone Church. He's also the founder and the CEO of Citizens United for Israel, an organization that has literally millions of people who help support Israel through the Citizens United for Israel. Pastor Hagee, welcome. Delighted to have you. Let's discuss, why is this such an important day for believers?
Governor, it's a pleasure to be with you tonight. It's an important day for Christians and Americans. Let's cover the American part first. For many years, people like Yasser Arafat, the United Nations, have implied that Jerusalem is up for grabs, that the Palestinians have a rightful place to have the city of Jerusalem. And because that they have presented this, Jerusalem has been something of a bait to get people to come to the peace table and come to terms on at the negotiating table to produce peace in the Middle East. I believe that what the president has done today will make peace a possibility on a much more accelerated pace. What he's doing now is taking Jerusalem off the table and saying it's time for there to be a peace treaty between the Palestinians and the Israeli people, and Jerusalem is no longer in play. I think that will accelerate the peace process. I think as a Christian, it's an exciting time because it marks the ability of God to control the affairs of men. Who could have believed that this would happen before this presidential election? This is a Jubilee year. In Leviticus, the 25th chapter, God clearly establishes the fact that he measures time in modules of 50 years. So let's go back to 1917, which was a Jubilee year. When that was the Balfour Declaration. You add 50 years to 1917, and you have 1967, which is the year Jerusalem was rejoined to the state, and the Jewish people prayed at the Western Wall for the first time in almost 2,000 years. Add 50 years to 1967, and you have the year 2017. We are at the close of the Jubilee year. David said, God has set a set time to honor the Jewish people. And that prophetic clock runs when the Jewish people are in the state of Israel. Anything that unifies Israel's claim to the land is spiritually enriching and is of advantage for the nations of the world to know. It's a wonderful day. It's a historic day. God bless President Trump for having the courage to make the promise and keep the promise, something that has not been done for more than 20 years to the American people.
You know, Pastor Hagee, just to jump in the fact that all this confusion and even the criticism that if the president does this, there could be violence. Well, the fact is there has been violence all over the Middle East, and the reality of moving the embassy to Jerusalem, where it should belong, because it is the capital of the modern nation of Israel, but it's also a city that has only been capital to one people, the Jewish people. No other people have ever claimed Jerusalem as a capital. And when people say, but the Palestinians have a right to it, the truth is the Palestinians are a relatively recent creation from 1962, when Yasser Arafat declared a Palestinian nation. There never has been a Palestinian nation up until that time, and it even then and even to today is not a nation. It is a group of people. They're more Jordanian and Bedouin than you can say Palestinian. In fact, when people say, well, the Palestinians go back thousands of years, I always say to them, go watch the movie, rent the movie Exodus with Paul Newman, made back in the early 60s. And the Palestinians, when they're referred to in that movie, are referring to Jews, because anyone who lived in the area was considered a Palestinian, whether they were of Jewish or Arab descent. So this whole notion that both have deep, long-standing historical ties to the city of Jerusalem as a capital, that has never been honest, that's never been accurate, but we have sort of played that game as an American nation. And I think what this president has done is to say, we're tired of playing the games. We're going to be honest, recognize that since the time of King David, Jerusalem was a capital for the Jewish state. But Pastor, let's talk a second about the value of this, the importance of it, and the embrace of it for Bible-believing Christians. You know, I had a conversation with the president several months ago, and what I told him was, Mr. President, you need to understand that for evangelicals, recognizing Jerusalem as the undivided capital of Israel is as non-negotiable as is the sanctity of life. And he looked at me kind of surprised. He said, you know, why is it? And I said, because for those of us who believe the Scriptures, we have no other option other than to believe that this real estate was deeded by God through Abraham, and that the idea that we would affirm that which is eternal and holy is something that brings a blessing to America, because the Scripture teaches that those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. Do you feel like that today America stands ready for a blessing?
Yes. My wife and I were privileged to have dinner at the White House with the president, and we talked for the better part of an hour about Jerusalem, and specifically the Jubilee year. And I was saying to the president, I said, Jerusalem begins in the book of Genesis. It's when Abraham placed Isaac on the altar to prove his love for God. That happened on the Temple Mount in the city of Jerusalem. The Bible says that God has put his name there, that the nations of the world may know forever that he is God. Jerusalem is where Isaiah and Jeremiah penned the principles of righteousness that became the moral foundations for Western civilization. Jerusalem is where Jesus Christ rode into that city and presented himself as the Messiah to the world. Jerusalem is the city where Jesus Christ is going to return and set up an eternal kingdom and rule the world for 1,000 years of peace. Jerusalem is the past, it's the present, it's the future. It is the city that is the city of God. It is a living city. It is something that is precious. in the heart of every believer and is something that is essential in the economy of God.
You know, my very first guest on the new show that I'm privileged to host on TBN was President Trump. And one of the questions that I posed to him was regarding the moving of the embassy and the recognition of Jerusalem. And part of the reason that that was important to even raise was that I'd been in Jerusalem when the president was there last May for the 50th anniversary of the reunification of Jerusalem. And I wondered, Mr. President, when is this going to happen? We have a little package that we've put together. We're going to go to it. Pastor Hagee will be joining me when we have seen the package, but it'll give you a little background and history as to what the president was thinking over the course of the past few months leading up to this very historic decision and his signature today to recognize Jerusalem as the undivided capital of Israel. Evangelicals are very interested in support for Israel.
Yes.
It's something near and dear to your heart. You've campaigned on it. You're the first American president to ever go as a sitting president to the Western Wall. Ambassador Friedman recently indicated that the embassy will be moved to Jerusalem. Do we have a time frame? Or
Well, we're going to make a decision in the not-too-distant future. I have determined that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. I've judged this course of action to be in the best interests of the United States of America and the pursuit of peace between Israel and the Palestinians. This is a long overdue step to advance the peace process and to work towards a lasting agreement. Israel is a sovereign nation with the right, like every other sovereign nation, to determine its own capital. Acknowledging this is a fact is a necessary condition for achieving peace. It was 70 years ago that the United States under President Truman recognized the State of Israel. Ever since then, Israel has made its capital in the city of Jerusalem, the capital the Jewish people established in ancient times. My announcement today marks the beginning of a new approach to conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. In 1995, Congress adopted the Jerusalem Embassy Act, urging the federal government to relocate the American embassy to Jerusalem and to recognize that that city, and so importantly, is Israel's capital. This act passed Congress by an overwhelming bipartisan majority and was reaffirmed by a unanimous vote of the Senate only 6 months ago. Yet for over 20 years, every previous American president has exercised the law's waiver, refusing to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem or to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital city. Presidents issued these waivers under the belief that delaying the recognition of Jerusalem would advance the cause of peace. Some say they lacked courage, but they made their best judgment based on facts as they understood them at the time. Nevertheless, the record is in. After more than 2 decades of waivers, we are no closer to a lasting peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. It would be folly to assume that repeating the exact same formula would now produce a different or better result.
This is a historic day. Jerusalem has been the capital of the Jewish people for 3,000 years. It's been the capital of Israel for nearly 70 years. It was here that our temple stood, our kings ruled, our prophets preached. Jerusalem has been the focus of our hopes, our dreams, our prayers for 3 millennia. From every corner of the earth, our people yearn to return to Jerusalem, to touch its golden stones, to walk its hallowed streets. So it's rare to be able to speak of new and genuine milestones in the glorious history of this city. Yet today's pronouncement by President Trump is such an occasion. We're profoundly grateful for the President for his courageous and just decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and to prepare for the opening of the U.S. Embassy here. This decision reflects the President's commitment to an ancient but enduring truth, to fulfilling his promises, and to advancing peace. The President's decision is an important step towards peace, for there is no peace that doesn't include Jerusalem as the capital of the State of Israel. I call on all countries that seek peace to join the United States in recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital and to move their embassies here. I share President Trump's commitment to advancing peace between Israel and all of our neighbors, including the Palestinians. This has been our goal from Israel's first day, and we will continue to work with the President and his team to make that dream of peace come true. I also want to make clear there will be no change whatsoever to the status quo at the holy sites. Israel will always ensure freedom of worship for Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. President Trump, thank you for today's historic decision to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. The Jewish people and the Jewish state will be forever grateful.
Jerusalem is today and must remain a place where Jews pray at the Western Wall, where Christians walk the stations of the cross, and where Muslims worship at Al-Aqsa Mosque. This is nothing more or less than a recognition of reality. It is also the right thing to do. It's something that has to be done. That is why, consistent with the Jerusalem Embassy Act, I am also directing the State Department to begin preparation to move the American Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This decision is not intended in any way to reflect a departure from our strong commitment to facilitate a lasting peace agreement. We want an agreement that is a great deal for the Israelis and a great deal for the Palestinians. We are not taking a position of any final status issues, including the specific boundaries of the Israeli sovereignty in Jerusalem or the resolution of contested borders. Those questions are up to the parties involved. The United States remains deeply committed to helping facilitate a peace agreement that is acceptable to both sides. I intend to do everything in my power to help forge such an agreement. Without question, Jerusalem is one of the most sensitive issues in those talks. The United States would support a two-state solution if agreed to by both sides. In the meantime, I call on all parties to maintain the status quo at Jerusalem's holy sites, including the Temple Mount, also known as Haram al-Sharif. Above all, our greatest hope is for peace. Israel is a testament to the unbreakable spirit of the Jewish people. From all parts of this great country, one message resounds, and that is the message of hope. Down through the ages, the Jewish people have suffered persecution, oppression, and even those who have sought their destruction. But through it all, they have endured, and in fact, they have thrived. I stand in awe of the accomplishments of the Jewish people, and I make this promise to you: my administration will always stand with Israel.
Well, this has been a very emotional day for those of us who love Israel, who have made many journeys there. My first trip there was in 1973 when I was 17 years old. So over the past 44 years, I've made many, many visits, too many to even remember. Today is special because it's a day that we have prayed for a very long time. That last little clip you saw of the president, I was there when he was making those comments. To be honest, I was a little disappointed because I was hoping he would use the occasion of his historic visit to Israel to announce then the recognition of Jerusalem as the undisputed and undivided capital. But it was worth waiting for, so I'm delighted that that has happened today, and now we are in the process of seeing it. Pastor Hagee, I welcome you back to the conversation. When I was there, something I've tried to explain to people, Muslims and Christians are able to worship freely throughout the nation of Israel. We're not restricted, and the government of Israel protects the holy places for not just the Jewish people, but for Christians and for Muslims equally. But when I went to Nablus, to Joseph's tomb, which is under the Palestinian Authority, we had to go under military guard in armored vehicles. We had to go at midnight, and they only are allowed to go once a month. And I'm thinking, why is it that in the Palestinian areas that Jews can only go occasionally? And I thought, this is something most people do not understand. The peace process cannot really conclude until there is a recognition from the Palestinians that Israel has a right to exist and the same right to worship at their holy sites that the Israelis give to the Palestinians throughout all the nation of Israel. So let me allow you to respond to that and why that this today is a huge step forward if there is going to be true peace.
Thank you, Governor. It's a step forward because the President of the United States, with all of his global influence, representing the most powerful nation in the world, is saying we support the Jewish right to have total control of the city. In the Bible, Jerusalem is called the city of God. It is called the city of God because God has chosen to put his name there. Jerusalem is far more important than Washington, D.C., far more important than Rome, far more important than Berlin or London. Jerusalem, the city of gold, is the future of the world. So we as believers, I've been to Israel for 38 times. Every time I go to the Western Wall and see all of those people praying together, I feel a presence of God unlike any place I have ever been on the planet. It was while I was praying at the wall in 1978 that I felt the commission of heaven to come back to America and do everything in my power to bring Christians and Jews together. And out of that experience was birthed the Night to Honor Israel that we began in San Antonio in 1981. And we intended just to do it one time, but when we started getting death threats and they shot out the windows to my car, and the night of the event there was a bomb threat on the building, I said, we need to stand with the Jewish people across this nation and to defend them, because to see evil and not call it evil is evil. Not to speak is to speak. So we continued speaking, and the Night to Honor Israel grew, and that birthed Christians United for Israel in 2006. And as we sit here tonight, there are 3.8 million plus Christians in America who are registered supporters of Israel in Christians United for Israel, but it was born in the spirituality that I experienced while I was in Israel. I encourage every person watching this telecast, if you have not been to Israel, you owe it to yourself to go there to see the harmony that exists where the Jewish people control the city. and see exactly for yourselves what people are saying about the Palestinian people. They do not live in poverty. They have a very, very posh and luxurious life. So it's very important for the American people to understand that Jerusalem is a spiritual taproot that is never going to go away. It's a very important place.
Well, Pastor, I think you're right. Every person who's not been to Israel should go. And I know you take people there. I've been taking people there since 1981. And every time people go there, they come away saying, I had no idea, because I thought I had a picture of it. And yet I find out I was totally maybe wrong about so many things, not just the ancient Israel, but the modern Israel. Pastor, thank you for joining us today. What a delight to have you here. And thank you for what you do with Citizens United for Israel, a premier organization to bring Christians in prayer and support for the nation of Israel. No one has been more at the forefront than you have. And we're just so grateful for your taking the time from San Antonio and joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. It's been a pleasure to be with you. And thank you for your help with Christians United for Israel.
It's always a joy to be at any of the events. They're extraordinary, to say the least. And as we continue on this special TBN, I guess, awareness of what has happened today, I hope that you understand that this is an extraordinarily important day. Let me just share with you that sometimes I'm asked by my Jewish friends, and I've gone many times to Israel when I'm the only non-Jewish person in the group. And they'll sometimes say, I don't understand why evangelicals are so supportive of Israel and of the Jewish people. And I said to one of my friends, and he said, that makes sense. But here's what I told him. I said, it's possible to be Jewish and have no relationship to Christians and Christianity. But for those of us who are believers in Jesus, for those of us who are Christian, we can't be who we are without a complete embracing of the Old Testament and everything that is foundational to our faith, which is the Jewish faith. And it was like the light came on, and he said, that makes sense. I can understand it. And as I tried to also explain, we're people of the book. We believe the Bible. We believe that it's still valid. And if God makes a promise, it doesn't wear out. There's no time limit on it. So when God says he gives the land, then indeed he does. So those are some of the reasons that for Bible-believing Christians across the planet, today is not just a day when we are observing something that involves diplomacy or statecraft. This is a day that involves a fulfillment of a promise of God that lay dormant for 2,000 years during the time of dispersion when Jews were forced out of Jerusalem. They came back, reestablished their nation in 1948. The city was once again accessible to them, and the holiest site, the Western Wall, as of 1967, exactly 50 years ago. And today, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, was able to take a position, take a stand, a courageous, and I would say a stand of great moral clarity to, in essence, say the United States recognizes not just the fact of Israel's existence, but recognizing Israel's existence and the undivided nature of Jerusalem is, in essence, a recognition of God's promise. Can there be peace from this point? Well, of course there can. But it starts with those who have opposed peace no longer celebrating terrorism, no longer paying people whose families have harbored a terrorist, no longer giving lifetime financial benefits to people, to those who have killed Jews, no longer naming streets or parks after terrorists, and sitting down at the table to try to make it happen. Well, thank you for joining us. I hope this has been helpful and informative and inspirational. From Nashville, Tennessee, this is Mike Huckabee for TBN. Thank you, and God bless.